All right, bankroll management, risk management, not the sexiest of topics, but a topic we really need to talk about, especially with the NFL and college football seasons about to get underway in the next couple of weeks. And what you really need to be doing right now is figuring out how much you have to spend and how much bankroll you have for the entire season. I mean, why this is important is because you're going to get yourself in trouble if you don't set aside a bankroll. Maybe not this season, maybe not next season, but at some point you will if you are not extremely disciplined. I could take you back to 97. I'm a couple of years out of college, and the way the local books would work is on a Monday would start the new week, right? So I don't know how I fared the week before. I remember I was doing fairly well at college football and the NFL, but I decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start the week out. It was like a $50 bettor. I didn't bet much more than that typically. I was going to start the week with a little NBA game. I had nothing to do on a Monday night. I'm going to watch an NBA game. So I take, I believe it was the Heat against the Nets. I take the dog, and the game goes triple overtime. I'm getting 3.5 points, and I am winning the game at the end of regulation, the first OT, second OT, and of course, the third overtime, a 3 late, makes it a 4-point game. I lose. Proceed to go on tilt for the rest of the week. Friday comes, I'm down about $600, and I decide to play 3 NHL games at $200 apiece, all favorites, and I knew hardly anything about the NHL as far from a gambling standpoint. Didn't really follow it that closely. I go out to the bar with some buddies. We're gonna watch the scores. We couldn't even watch the games. And as the scores are coming in, this is the days where you had to look at the ticker on ESPN. Didn't have it on your phone. And one by one, boom, they lose. I'm down about $1,200 going into Saturday. Now, the NFL in December has their Saturday games. The NFL schedule that next day was going to be the Giants and the Redskins in the early game, and then the Patriots and Steelers for the late game. So my buddies are all Giant fans, and they're pushing me to bet the Giants, and I'm looking at it myself and having a couple of shots later, I decide the Giants are definitely the play. I'm going to take the Giants. I forget what they were favored by, but the Giants at home, I said, that's the play. I'm putting $1,000. It's going to get me out of the hole. I'm taking the Giants on the early game. Well, I don't know about you guys. I don't know how old you guys are, but when I was in my early 20s and I would go out hard, come home at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting up before noon was not the easiest thing in the world. So I wake up, I think it was a 12:30 start to the game. I probably woke up at 12:35, tried to put the game in with the Giants, could not. The game had already kicked off. And you know the moral of the story. I think the Giants won by 30-plus points in that game. It just going away would have got me out of the hole. So now I'm really tilting. I call my buddy's uncle, who's a bookie in Aruba, to find out if any of the sharp players that play with him liked anything for the day. So he said the one play that they didn't like the NFL game. The one play they had was Kentucky in college basketball. And I believe they were laying 16. At no point in that game, I bet $500 on that. At no point in that game were they ever covering the 16 points. So that game was a loser from the opening tip right to the end of the game. They never were covering that spread. So I put myself in a hole now, $1,700. I've got like $1,000 limit to bet. So I bet. So now we're mulling it around, me and my buddies. And I said, well, let me call down to Aruba again, talk to my buddy's uncle. And he says, well, the sharp players don't really like anything in the NFL game, but every sucker is betting Pittsburgh. So I believe it was Pittsburgh +2. And he said every sucker in the world is betting Pittsburgh. And so I says, well, I'm going the other side. I'm gonna fade the suckers. I'm gonna take the Patriots. This is Drew Bledsoe era with Pete Carroll coaching the Patriots and Bill Cowher as the Steeler coach. Cordell Stewart was the quarterback at the time. Fast forward, the game is in the fourth quarter. The Patriots are up 21-13, trying to run the clock out. They need a first down to basically end the game. It was third down, I want to say maybe 3 yards or 4 yards. And I said to my buddy, I said, we've got to pass. I want to throw the ball, but make sure you throw it over the middle so that at least if it's picked, the odds are they're going to stop them right in the middle of the field. They still have to drive. There was like It was pretty close to about 2 minutes to go in the game. They'd still have to drive down, score, and get the 2-point conversion and beat me in overtime for me to lose this game. So I said, throw the ball, but throw it over the middle of the field. Well, he throws the ball to the sideline, gets picked. They take it all the way back to, I believe, the 1-yard line. And I said, okay, I'm being ultimately optimistic here. I said, they still didn't get in the end zone. They still didn't make this 2-point conversion to beat me. Next play was a touchdown. And then the next play was a 2-point conversion. And the game goes to overtime. I said, well, they still have to beat me in overtime. Sure enough, it took maybe, I think it might have even been the first play that they got into field goal range, Pittsburgh, and kicked the field goal, game over. This was the old overtime rules, and I lose. And so kind of a, story that it was probably good in my life that it happened. And if anything like that happened to you guys, hopefully you learn from your lesson like I learned from my lesson. So I never let myself ever get in that situation again where I now owe the bookie money that I physically had the money, but couldn't really afford to lose at that time of my life. So, but I had absolutely no bankroll management, no risk management, did not know what I was doing in that department. So like everyone else, you get in a hole and you start chasing losers. I would see this with, when I worked with FX retail clients. I'd even see this with professional clients as well, and this is what got people in trouble. If you know of any of these, if you know the Allied Irish Bank case, which you might not know, but you could look it up, Allied Irish Bank, foreign exchange. You're talking about a guy who was a professional trader who got himself in a bad position and just kept doubling down. He was, of course, covering it up, but you'll see traders who are professionals do this, certainly professional bettors, where you double down on losses and eventually you get yourself in trouble. So I want you to avoid that situation. I don't want you to get yourself in a position that you really can't get yourself out of or that you can't afford to be in. So how we do that is you have to allocate before the season starts a set amount of money that you are willing to risk on the season. Now, I don't care if it's $500 for the entire season, $1,000, $10,000, whatever that set amount of money is, you need to have that cash on hand. I want it in a separate account, under your mattress, wherever you're going to keep that cash. That's where you need to have it, and it needs to be separate. This cannot be money that you're using to pay your rent, your mortgage, your food bill, right? This has to be money strictly for your business, and this is a business, okay? So if you're going to bet $100 or $200 a game, but you could really only afford to risk $1,000 or lose $1,000 on the entire season, then you're betting way too much. So how much should you be betting? Well, once we've established what our bankroll is, I advocate 1 to 2% of your bankroll per play should be your typical unit size. Okay, so for the NFL, college football, if we're talking strictly here, playing -110 against the spread, very vanilla type of things here, you should be playing somewhere between 1 and 2%. That means on a $10,000 bankroll, you're a $100 or $200 bettor. That is it. That is going to keep you from ever getting yourself in trouble because these are coin flip games, and even at the best, right? My system's been pretty good, picking about 56% of the time. But 56% of the time means you lose 44% of the time. And that's real close to a 50-50 split, right? And if you ever went to a statistics class or you ever sat there and if you have the time, do it now, flip a coin 200 times, you're going to run through streaks of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tails or heads in a row. And those tails or heads represent wins and losses in what we do. So I don't care how good you are going to run into situations where you just run bad and you lose 7 or 8 games in a row. And if you get yourself in a situation where you're going to lose 5 in a row and you're a $100 or $200 bettor, and now you get yourself down $500 or $1,000, and you then chase and you start betting $500 and $1,000 to get yourself out, very, very quickly you're going to find yourself completely wiped out, your bankroll wiped out, and even worse, maybe owing money, right? We don't want that situation to happen. So really focus on 1 to 2% of your entire bankroll, have that bankroll set on the side. Now, from a risk management standpoint, if you are parlaying games, if you are teasing games, you have to understand how much risk do I have on a particular side of this game, on the team, on a total, whatever the case is, right? So just betting, if you're a 1% of your bankroll guy and you've got $10,000 bankroll and you're betting 1% of that bankroll, it's $100 a game, but you're teasing the Raiders 7 times. You have Oakland in 7 different teasers. You've now got 700 units or $700 or 7 units on Oakland if you're betting them, if you're betting 1 unit per those plays. We don't want that. We don't want that much exposure, right? So I want you to have 1 or 2% exposure, maybe, in a situation where you have multiple bets, multiple teasers, you're round robbing, it's a round robin situation, you're going to up that maybe a slightly. But I don't want to see you have 10% of your entire bankroll riding on one particular side of a game that weekend. Way too much risk. So what you're going to do is you're going to scale it down. So not only is it just going to be 1 or 2% per play, but it should be maybe let's go up to 3 or 4% total risk on a side. All right. In the foreign exchange currency world where I come from, you may be taking positions on the dollar against the U.S. dollar against Canadian dollar, the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc, and the euro dollar against the Canadian dollar. Well, those are 3 different trades all related to the Canadian dollar, right? So if I go long Canadian dollar against all 3 of those other currencies, and I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical with foreign currency trading stuff, but I have to understand that my risk against the Canadian dollar is greater than just any one of those specific trades. Even though I am not risking any more than I said I was going to risk on a particular trade, I now collectively have more risk. I have more at risk on the Canadian dollar. So again, to come into our terms, if this is the Oakland Raiders we're talking about, and I go and put 1 unit on a parlay, and I put 5 different parlays in with Oakland, well, I'm really not betting 1 unit here on Oakland. I've got 5 units at risk on Oakland. I've got much more risk to Oakland than I really need to have or should have and can afford to have. So in that case, outline your bets, understand where you're betting, understand what you potentially could bet if lines move, right? So this is all about preparation. Understand that, potentially here, right now I've got 3 bets on Oakland and potentially I might have 5. Okay, so understand maybe I'm going to scale back. I'm going to just put in a quarter of a unit. So instead of $100, I'm going to play these for $25 each. And if I wind up with 5 bets, okay, I'm at the $125 in total risk on Oakland here, as opposed to I've now got $500 at risk on Oakland, and it's a sweat. All right, so just a couple of tips on bankroll, but again, the key things I want you to take from this is understand what your bankroll is. Understand how much you should be betting per game, per side, right? That 1 to 2% number. And then understand that if you are taking multiple bets in different aspects, if you have straight bets, parlays, and teasers all on the same team, your risk is not just that 1 or 2%. It's a multiple of that. So scale back the bets to fit that. All right, good luck. And if you guys have any situations where you got yourself in trouble, I'd love to hear about it. And if you have any questions about bankroll management, I'd love to hear about that as well. Go ahead and leave a comment for me. Thanks.